The time is approximately 0600 on the morning of January 25th, 1975. The place is RNAS Culdrose, a search and rescue helicopter base near Land's End in the western United Kingdom. The weather is cause for concern, with 45 knots of wind and increasing every minute. Although the base isn't fully staffed yet in the pre-dawn hours, a distress call from a stricken vessel and reports of people in the water force the helicopter crew to launch into dangerous conditions. This is Legacy Survival Stories.
Legacy Survival Stories.
Good day, everybody. My name is Dan Latremouille, and welcome to Legacy Survival Stories. Today we've got a great episode for you featuring a long-time underwater escape specialist, 20 plus years with survival systems training, and before that he was a search and rescue diver with Her Majesty's Royal Navy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Peter Gibbs. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you, Dan. It's good to be here.
Very good to have you, sir. So let's quickly go back and say common lineage between you and me at Survival Systems Training in Dartmouth, and you first came over to...
Approximately 1992, and I came for a helicopter symposium, and I was still in the Royal Navy then.
Okay, so you were still an active member with...
Yes, I was a Chief Petty Officer Air Crewman.
Now, that would have put you at approximately what age?
Well, let me see. I would probably be about 39.
39. Sprightly and young and youthful.
Yes.
Relatively speaking.
Relatively.
Okay, and prior to that, so that was when you first came over here, you did a symposium, and then you ended up sort of segueing over here and moved over here permanently?
Yes, at the end of the symposium, after I gave my talk on what I was here for, I said in a year's time I'll be looking for a job. and so the owner of the company actually contacted my boss and wrote a letter to him and said, did he mean that? And the boss phoned me and I said, yeah, I did mean it. And that's how I came.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So what was the symposium? What were you speaking about at the symposium?
I was talking about how the Royal Navy's approach, or the Navy's approach to helicopter underwater escape training.
Okay, so furthering initiating really your legacy as what we're calling here an underwater escape specialist, which is fair to say. I've known you for well, I would be at 13 years I've known you, and you were certainly the grandpappy of the underwater escape bit. So
I still am.
So let's skip ahead then, or I guess in this case, back to the reason you're here today, the story you're here to tell. So if you can please set the tone for us. When and where were you?
Okay, so I was based at a place called RNAS Culdrose in the UK, which is down in the southwest approaches, or right on the end, very close to Land's End.
Okay,
and I'd been a mechanic on a helicopter when I first joined the Navy.
All right, so you joined the Navy as a mechanic?
No, I joined the Navy as an able seaman.
Aha, okay, so you did the dirty work up front. Okay.
So in those days you all joined as able seamen, or you just joined, and then you became an able seaman after you did the course, and then they would stream you into the direction that they thought that you might be best suited for.
And they, for some reason, thought that you had shown some mechanical aptitude? Or?
Yes, apparently when I did my test, my mechanical aptitude was above average, and so they actually said, "What, would you like to be a mechanic?" Initially I thought, well, yes, I would. I'd like to be a mechanic anywhere. And then this person said, well, we've got 4 slots for helicopters. And, at the age of sort of 17 and a half, 18, I couldn't even spell the word helicopter, okay? But they were going to train me as a mechanic.
Those are those flying whirlybird things, right?
Yeah, and so I went away and learned how to be a mechanic.
Okay.
And while I was doing that, I used to notice these people get in them and fly around and come back and have a cup of tea and sit around talking. Plus they paid you a little bit more.
Okay.
Nothing too fantastic, And that's how it all started. I volunteered for it. I saw an actual, what they call a defence council instruction. They were looking for search and rescue divers. And I thought, well, that sounds like me. And even though I had been diving, I'd never been a search and rescue one.
When you were doing diving prior to this, it had been like just on your own?
No, it would have been on the place I was based at. We had a ship's diving team.
Okay.
And so I'd already learnt to dive, but not to the extent that you would on a search and rescue divers course. And again, being young, I didn't read all the rules and regulations in the instructions.
Well, who does?
No, well, even now. And so what happened was, I went away and I did my search and rescue divers course, and then when I came back from there, I had to learn how to be a navigator, and I had to learn all about the back of the aircraft and how to navigate, and it was all done on dead reckoning.
So when you say dead reckoning, you're talking eyesight, pieces of land?
Yeah, and a sea chart in front of you, and it's really like seamanship at about 120 miles an hour. Okay.
and a little bit up off the water.
Yeah, and further up. Okay, and that's how we learn, and eventually when I stepped out of being fully qualified, I had all of about 35 flying hours. Okay, so I'd been flying for all of 35 hours.
Okay, so you've been flying. That means you've been airborne in an aircraft, in a helicopter. What were they flying at the time? Are we talking Sea Kings or prior?
No, in the initial training, it was what was known as a Wessex 1 helicopter, which is a really old type helicopter.
Gotcha. All right, so you got 35 hours in now, and then you become a search and rescue diver. Now you are a search and rescue diver?
Yes, yeah, I'm fully qualified. And what they do then is they send you to a search and rescue unit somewhere. Okay, and in those days there are a lot more. But I was lucky enough to be sent to a search and rescue unit on the base where I lived.
Oh, well, that's happy coincidence for you.
And that's amazing for the military to get me back to the place that I came from. Yeah.
Okay, so now we've set the tone that Peter Gibbs has now become a search and rescue diver with Her Majesty's Royal Navy, and you are based at, let me see if I have this right, RNAS Cold Rose?
Yes, yeah.
All right, so we've got the background now, so please tell us about this interesting event you've got.
So I joined the outfit, if you want to call it that, and what happens is it's like any new boy, there's all the old guys there. Okay, and as soon as the new boy steps in the door, oh, do this, do that, and within about 4 days of me being there, I'm on watch at the weekend.
Is this like sort of standard for the unit, that standard FNG guy?
Yeah, the new guy, you're going to do this. And of course all the old guys want to go on weekend and stuff like that. So I go, I say, I can't say no, and so there I am. I'm fully qualified, and they give you a check flight and more than one, throughout the 4 days, and the chief says, you're okay, you're good to go, and there I am.
So the guy who wants Saturday night off says that, yeah, you're good for Saturday night, I'm taking off.
yeah, you're good, you'll be all right.
You'll be good enough.
Yeah, and so that's how it happened. And so Friday night I go home and the wind is getting up and it's...
Let me, just break in. At the time, were you, so if you're on search and rescue standby?
Yeah.
But you're able to go home?
Yeah, because the unit that I'm operating on is daylight hours only.
Okay, all right. So if there's an after-hours call, they're just going to have to wait till people trickle in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But people don't trickle in, it's already organised, so it'd only be about an hour.
Okay.
And then they'd be off and gone.
And the people that would get that call, they know that they're the ones on the duty for that call? Okay, and that's you. All right.
Yeah. So anyway, I go home and again, I'm sitting at home and the wind's getting up and everything, and I already know what wind's like, I've been out and about and I've been in the Navy long enough to know that wind is wind, And so I get up in the morning, I think, well, it's my first time ever on watch. I better go early, all right? So as I'm driving to work in my Volkswagen Beetle, all right, as I'm driving down past the sea, all right, and there's no protection from the wind and the sea, I'm doing like 65 mile an hour and the old Beetle gets airborne, with the big air scoops on the front. And so I realised that it's really windy. I can't see anything, and it's pouring with rain and spray. And then when I get to work, I get there and it's pitch black.
So I should ask this. This base, RNAS Cold Rose, whereabouts is it?
It's on the western end of the UK. It's about 14 miles away from Land's End.
Okay. All right. Western UK, 14 miles from Land's End. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
I'm just trying to put this in my mind here, and I like to keep my little map in front of me so I get a sense of it.
So I get to work, and the first thing I realise is, it is really windy, and it's, I've never seen it like this. And so anyway, I walk in, and I'm walking down the corridor towards the crew room, and Paul, who's the navigator, all right, or the hoist operator, he comes out and he looks at me and he said, "Just get your stuff ready, because we're going to go as soon as we can. We're going to go and do a search for a ship that we believe is in difficulty somewhere southwest of us." And okay, fine. So I put all my gear in the aircraft and everything like that, which we used to do. We'd carry our gear with us. And the aircraft's all there. And
just for curiosity, when you say pack all your gear into the aircraft, for you as the rescue diver, what does that gear look like?
Well, really what it means is that I check out there's 2 diving sets in there. There's a set of fins and a mask and etc. and a life jacket and stuff like that.
Okay, so we're talking
General
rescue swim type stuff.
Type stuff, yeah. Okay. And Paul, the crewman, he has his own stuff to look after. And then obviously we only have one pilot because we fly single pilot. And this is in a Whirlwind helicopter, all right? And it's a really old helicopter, okay?
So you're feeling good.
Yes, I'm excited because I've never searched for anything, all right? And again, my pilot, all right, his nickname is Swampy.
Swampy.
Yeah, because his last name is Marsh. Okay, so
okay, all right.
That's why we.
So it's got nothing to do with his ability to fly.
No.
Okay,
all right. Actually, a very experienced and a good pilot. Thank heavens. All right. So he comes past, and he's a lieutenant in the Navy, and I say good morning, sir. He goes, "Good morning, Gibbs. Just get your gear ready. I'm going to start the aircraft up just outside the hangar in the lee of the wind." All right, so I understand that. And he said, "I just need you to help push it out." All right. Now, the reason he's pushing it on the lee side of the hangar, or we're going that way, is because you can't start them up in the wind when it's over 45 knots.
So the wind is high enough that you can't even start, that you're not...
You're not supposed to engage the rotors, all right? So Lieutenant Marsh, all right, Swampy, all right, probably shouldn't use his name, but okay. Anyway, so what he does is he gets in it, and we push it out along with the ground crew, and as soon as we're out and he sees a break in the speed of the wind, of course he's got an airspeed indicator, and as soon as he sees that, he starts it, or he engages it, gets it all going, and then we can climb in, all right, because that's the dangerous part. When it starts, if it's really windy and it's gusty, it can damage the aircraft, and we all get in this, and then we taxi out onto a perimeter track, and now we realise we're not supposed to take off in the dark, all right, but we've already had a message from the duty officer to say that this ship has sunk and there are people in the water.
So, sorry, you said it's dark. What time of day are we talking about here?
Well, we would normally get to work about an hour early from daylight. All right, so it's in January, so we're there at sort of 5:30.
Okay, so we're not talking ridiculous 2 o'clock in the morning.
No. We get there normally an hour before sunrise. So then what happens is, the pilot's talking about, we're not supposed to take off in darkness. The tower should be open at least, but it's not. Okay, so he says, I know what I'll do. I'll talk to the crash truck. The crash truck is the fire engine. Okay, and that's always there when you start up and go. Okay, so he talks to the fire engine, and the guy in the fire engine says, "Well, you're not supposed to take off in the dark unless the tower's open." And the pilot says, "Well, we're going anyway, all right, because it's a matter of life and death."
At this point, are you Like, are you, as the diver in the back end of the helicopter, are you feeling that? Like, there's somebody might be out there actually.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And of course now it's dawned on us. You know, the aircraft is we lift off and go, and what we do is we fly towards the Lizard Lighthouse, because that's a big flashing light and you can see it. All right, so we're going to depart from there, and we know the rough position, and we're going to depart and fly towards it. Okay, now the rough position is about 30 miles southwest of where we are.
Okay, 30, and that's we're talking 30 miles offshore. Like
Yeah,
away,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. And so anyway, what we do is off we go, and you know we're flying at about I would say 1,000 feet on the way out, and then what happens is Paul, who's doing the navigation, he actually comes up and he says, "Gibbo, that's my nickname, can you check my nav, because I'm a qualified navigator as well." He said, "We're only doing about 30 knots ground speed, which means the wind is pushing us at about 60 knots. So we're flying into wind."
So your helicopter is supposed to fly at, say, 90-ish knots?
Yes, yeah.
But you're only making 30 because
knots
there's so much wind.
over the ground, yeah.
Wow.
So then the pilot, he says, "Well, probably if we go lower, the wind will, you know, be nicer to us." Well, we went lower, and it was so windy, all right, there was turbulence coming off the waves, and now, as a diver, I can get a really good look at the waves, and I'm thinking, oh, it's pretty rough. It's like mega rough, all right?
Now you're looking back at that mechanic job thinking that wasn't so bad.
Yeah. And so anyway, I'm all prepared for it, and then we fly out towards where we're going to go. We get an updated position, so we have to cross wind a little bit, but nothing that would stop us. And we eventually, we find a lifeboat upside down. Now, as a search and rescue diver, my job would be to jump in, get underneath it, and see if there's anybody underneath the lifeboat.
So when you're talking lifeboat, you're talking about like
big, you know,
a ship has launched its lifeboat and it's upside down in the water now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So and again, you yourself would know how big these lifeboats are. They're big, all right. And it was upside down. We're just about to dispatch me into the water to go and have a look, and they receive another. There's a life raft with people in it about 2 or 3 miles away.
So you found a lifeboat that is upside down and nobody visible, but there might be somebody inside, and now you've got word that there's a life raft
with people in it alive.
Wow.
So now...
Who's feeding you the information?
Okay, so the information is coming from the Coast Guard, all right, but also involved in this is there are 2 ships on scene. One is a passenger vessel, and the other, I believe, was a cargo vessel.
Okay, so commercial, merchant marine type.
Yeah. And what they've done is they've closed in on the position. Okay, and one of them spotted it and gave an update, and that's what we received. And so we flew over there. All right.
Okay.
And of course now I know I don't need my diving gear on, so I dropped my breathing apparatus and everything, and now it'll be straightforward hoisting them out of a life raft, and going from there.
So your job in this so with the lifeboat, would they have actually expected you to wear your dive equipment, put on your breathing apparatus and all the rest of it, and actually swim underwater and go in the damn thing?
And well, it's an open lifeboat in those. This one was an open lifeboat.
Ah, okay. So at least looking inside would have been easy.
It would have been easier than going actually into a lifeboat.
Yeah,
all right?
Like a modern enclosed one.
Enclosed one.
Okay, all right.
I'm going to be lowered down, and we're going to pick them up individually, and either bring them back to the helicopter, or we discussed that what we'd do is we could put them on the ship, and the passenger ship was a ferry, and it was called the SS St Patrick. And it was running from Cherbourg to Ireland somewhere. Okay. And they had on the front of back from the bows, they had a huge, great big awning. And so like
a big open area you could use for the helicopter, kind of.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't be able to land it on there, but you could use it. And the idea would have been just to lower me down onto the deck anywhere, and we'll go from there, because we realised how rough it was now, and we're running in to do this. And so we've discussed it quickly, and this is what we're going to do. Okay, so as we come over the top of the life raft, there's a guy there like this, with his arms up. And so I'm lowered straight down, and then as I get to him like this, what does he do is, as I'm about to put the strop over him, which goes under your arms so you can lift them out of the water.
So for the lay people out there, that's basically a big thick strap that goes up sort of up under your arms and then attaches to the bottom of the cable that comes down from the helicopter.
And I wear a system. It's called a double lift, which attaches me to it as well. Okay, so I'm just about to do that, and then all of a sudden this guy just jumps on me. All right, and he starts wrestling with me and everything like that. And so Paul, he knows what he's going to do. He raises me clear of him. All right.
So this fella in the raft, as soon as you got close enough, he basically
jumped on me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Wow.
And of course now I understand why he did it, because thought he was going to die, and so he grabbed hold of me, and we have a little wrestle, and he's holding my helmet here. And so I push him off, and he falls back in the life raft. And then Paul brings me up and says, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, let's go for somebody else." And so
that guy got quickly bumped to the back of the line.
Yeah. Well, it was just a matter of whoever's there ready.
How big was the raft?
Okay, so this is a little bit of this came up in the inquiry. All right, because the raft, they say it was a 10-person life raft, and I believe it was a 5-person.
So pretty small then.
Yeah, and also it had suffered a lot of damage. Okay, now I'll explain that as we go.
Okay,
So because they didn't have a lifeboat, they'd all tried to get in the life raft. Okay, and there were 12 people tried to get in the life raft. Okay, and they realised once they were all in it, that they would have to get out. Some of them would have to get out and stay out on the outside, and they took it in turns.
So for the folks at home, when you consider a life raft, if you take, say, for example, like say a 10-person life raft, those are designed so that when 10 people are in it, those 10 people are essentially shoulder to shoulder with virtually no extra space at all.
Yeah.
So when you start talking about the possibility of there being maybe 12 people in something closer to a 5-person life raft, you're talking about a sardine can.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
And the one of the reasons that life was really uncomfortable for them in the life raft is the lower chamber had perished. Okay. So all right. So the normal life raft has got a lower tube and an upper tube, and the lower one has got busted, popped, something. It got raft rot. Okay.
Oh.
And you understand what that means?
The plot thickens.
Yeah.
Okay. So please continue.
Raft rot is caused by not servicing the life rafts properly. Okay. And it's caused by leaving it in, you want to call it inclement weather. It gets wet, and then it stays there for the prolonged maintenance period, which in those days was probably 5 years before it got serviced. So it'd be once every 5 years. And what happens is it rots, and then you inflate it, and one chamber will either go bang and it will go down, or it won't inflate, or something like that.
Something bad will happen.
Okay, so, and I had no clue any of this had been going on, because I'm more concerned about trying to rescue the guys. So as we're running in for the second time, all right, there's another guy, okay, and he's ready. I can see this guy, he knows what to do. He's got his hands up in the air, and I come along and I just put the strop over him like that, pull the becket, make it tight on him like that. I'm about to give the thumbs up that I'm ready to go, and all of a sudden I'm pulled out of the raft with him, and I have no idea what's going on. I'm underwater, and I think, holy crap, maybe the helicopter's ditch. I had I had time to think that, and I can see this guy in front of me. He's with me.
So he's in the strop, and he's basically attached to you.
Yeah, he is.
And you're going underwater.
And I'm underwater.
Good heavens.
And so I look like this, and I can see him. You know, I've got my eyes open, and I can see him, and I think I better let him go. All right, so I disconnect him quickly. And when I disconnect, I realise that I've got all the hoist cable with me. And so what's happened is the helicopter nav has been hoisting me, and he saw the hoist cable. He thought it was wrapped round me, and he knew if the tension came on, it would cut through you or it'd cut my arm off. And what he did was he jettisoned the hoist cable. But because we were moving sideways, all right, that's how it dragged us underwater. And all I did was I just released it underwater, threw it away, and I surfaced. I couldn't see the helicopter. I looked all around and I thought, oh my God, it's ditched. And so I thought, well, what do I do? And then
you start thinking about one more person in that little tiny raft.
Well, yeah. But as I went up on a wave, I saw the guy that was with me in the trough of the wave, and I've got my fins on and everything, so I swim down to him like that, grab him, and say, look, it's going to be all right. I'll get you back to the life raft. Okay, so now I spend a few minutes swimming with him.
And what was the state of this guy? Was he?
Yeah, he was
okay?
He was okay. You know, but one of the things that you know, the lucky, if I can call it luck, is the raft itself hadn't got a sea anchor deployed or anything like that, so it wasn't being held anywhere, and so it would spin on the waves and it would spin towards the bottom of the troughs. So as I'm pulling him down the side of the wave, all right, swimming for the life raft because I can see it now, it would disappear, then it would come back and I would see it was going to be in the next trough. I managed to get him back to the raft and get him in there. And I got him in, and then what happens is, of course, now I can hear a helicopter and I can feel it hovering above me. And the crew in the helicopter, Paul, the navigator, he's like,
giving you the...
Yeah, are you okay?
Okay,
and
all right.
You know, have you got everything with you? Or is there any bits missing? That sort of thing. And I'm looking at him, and I know we've got a life raft in the actual helicopter. And I'm trying to indicate to him that, you know, pass me the life raft, and MS5, and I'm going like this. And he looks at me and he goes like that. And I know...
So, sorry, for those that can't see, he asked if he made like a drinking motion.
Yeah. And I know that that's an indicator that they're low on fuel.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Wow.
And so now...
Because you're not having a bad enough day.
No, and, you know, so what happens next is he indicates and he says we're going to go, and I give the thumbs up, yeah, I've got nothing else to, you know, I can't say no, don't go. and off it goes.
Your bargaining power is very low at that point.
And I already know that they'd be short on fuel, all right? And again, off they go, and of course they're downwind, so they can go really fast. And what you try and do, if you're really short and you think you might have to, you'll try for the nearest point of land, which is what they would do. And so off they go. And so I think, well, what do I do now? I tie myself to the life raft, and I think...
So tying back to the original piece of junk life raft?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know it's a piece of junk because I haven't got in it yet. Okay. So I'm tied to the outside, and I can see the people inside, the ones that are alive, are having real problems, you know, staying in there.
So I want to focus on the ominous tone of that sentence.
Yeah.
You get in that raft, and the ones that are alive, you can see. So by saying that, you're indicating that not everyone is alive.
Not everyone is alive.
Oh,
no.
dear.
So 4 alive and 2 floating around in the bottom, all right? And in the ensuing wait to be rescued, okay, at the end of the day, there's only me and 2 guys alive, all right? So there were already some had perished. The guys that had been on the outside of the raft, I know now what happened is they got cold, they let go, which is...
And then floated off to...
Floated off.
Wherever.
Okay. So I decided that it'd be better for me to get in the life raft, and so I climb in the life raft, and again, the ships that are close are really trying to protect us, take it in turns.
So they're, when you say protect you, you mean like try and sort of get upwind and give you a little bit of shelter kind of thing?
Yeah. And so the one that could manoeuvre the easiest, or I think, I'm not a ship's captain, but the ferry with passenger ferry, that one came in really close to us, and it would pass us. And one of the survivors said to me, we got a line from that ferry, but we couldn't hold on to it because it was too cold. We were too cold. And so I'd already thought to myself, well, I know what I'm going to do at the end of the day. If that ferry comes close to us, I could swim and climb up the scramble net on the side. All right? So I wasn't too put out. I did think to myself, and it's amazing what you do think, I thought like this, I'm going to be late home for dinner. When I was sat in it, and that was one of the things, I'm going to be late home for dinner.
Could somebody please send a text or a telegraph to Homestead and let them know I'm going to be a few minutes late?
I'm now concentrating on trying to keep them alive, and literally what's happening, the raft is spinning halfway up the waves, and then, in a really rough sea, the top parts of the waves break off and roll down. That's coming through the raft, and it's trying to wash everybody out. And so I'm just in the middle, I'm grabbing hold of everybody, right?
So you're in there, and you've got how many live souls now?
I think there's 4 alive and 2 dead. I don't have time to check for pulses and things like that.
No, probably your hands full with the 4 live souls that are barely hanging on.
Yeah. The 2 guys that survived, they had lots of clothing on, but the rest of them were, in their PJs, all right?
When you say lots of clothing, we're talking normal-ish clothing, like winter jackets, that kind of stuff?
Okay, so when the ship started to capsize, because the cargo moved, all right, the captain said, look, lads, we're going to have to abandon. And so 2 of them thought, well, that'll be cold, that water, it's middle of January. And what happened is they went down their cabins, they put on all their warm clothing, and they put their oilskins over the top, and then they put the life jackets on. The thing that was really good about, and I didn't really understand this, the experts said that because they put their oilskins on, when the wind and the waves were coming through, it wasn't penetrating their clothing, all right, like it was the guys that are in their PJs,
their pajamas,
with a life jacket on. Everything's penetrating, the wind and the waves, and
just sucking the energy right out of them.
Yeah, and that's what it does. Well, it does.
Yeah.
And that eventually there like I said, there were 4 alive in there. Okay, and the 2 that died were really because they were freezing cold. They weren't dressed properly, and I'm trying to hold them in all the time, and I'm grasping them, and then one of them actually died in my arms, and I have to ask the other guys, do you mind if I put him down? And they said, well, why do you want to put him down? I said, well, he's not with us anymore. I don't want to tell him that he's dead.
You don't want to say those words,
but unfortunately, that's what had happened. And
so this guy, you're wrestling basically with people. You latched onto them, trying to keep them head out of the water, face out of the water in a raft. Yeah. And like this guy expires right in your arms.
Yeah. Oh. And so, I asked the guys, and they said, well, yeah, and so I tie him on and put him down, and then I concentrate on the 2 that are actually conscious and are still talking,
Which are the 2 that have the layers of clothing and the oilskins.
And so I stay like that, and like I've been saying, the ships were passing us really close to protect us from the wind.
By the way, I want to go, if you don't mind, I want to go back a second. What are you wearing when you say you get your gear on? Are you in a thick wetsuit or?
Yeah, I'm in a thick wetsuit. I've got
like a 7mm or something.
A 7mm with a not a Farmer John, but a jacket and everything.
Ah, okay, all right. Like one of those ones that's like an underlayer that's sort of legs and body, and then an overlayer that's body and arms.
I have the legs, and I've got long johns on. Okay, and I have a neoprene vest, and then I've got a big thick life jacket, not life jacket, but a big thick neoprene jacket that goes over me.
So how are you faring in the cold at this point?
I feel no pain. All right, I'm busy, so I'm working hard. All right, and I didn't feel cold once.
Really?
Yeah, I did. And
what kind of water temperature were you? So January in that part of the world, probably 2 degrees?
Be +8, I think, maybe 7.
And for anybody who doesn't think that's cold, just go ahead and pour tap water from your tap, put it in the fridge for 4 hours, and then take it out and stick your hand in that. Leave it there for a minute or two, and that'll give you a sense of just how cold that is.
So I didn't feel the cold, and of course I'm relatively used to it. So that was the state of things in the life raft. And so I thought, well, if the ship comes close enough to me, that if they throw a line to me, I'll be able to tie on. And then...
Tie on, like to the life raft?
Yeah, to the life raft. And then they'd probably be able to pull the life raft towards where it would go to the side of the ship, all right? But they're getting closer and closer, and they're the crew are dropping. It looked like, in fact, it probably cooking oil. All right, because what they're trying to do is, years ago they said if you could tip oil, some form of oil on the tops of the sea, it will calm it or make it calmer, and they were doing all this. And that didn't work at all.
I was going to say, I was just going to ask, because for a little bit of marine lore for everybody back home, old school lifeboats actually had an oil spigot up forward, so that as you're bashing through the waves, you could squirt this oil out on the water in front of you. The theory being that it would somehow make the waves not so bad. I got to tell you, it's a plot with holes. I have a hard time imagining how it would work, but
I can tell you, Mother Nature doesn't do that. Okay, so we're in the life raft, and I know that there'll be helicopters coming to pick us up, and so what happens is the ship, the SS St. Patrick, is getting closer and closer, and
so is she like making sort of circles around you and trying to make a pass close by?
Yeah, and I know that they're probably thinking about coming really close to us, and so I'm not too concerned, all right, but as one of these particular times, they come really close. They're like probably less than 10 meters away from us, all right?
Which probably looked awfully big outside the hatch of that life raft.
But the most scary thing for me was the guys in the life raft are not thinking about anything like this, but as they come really close to us, they hit a huge wave, and the bow goes under the waves like that, and what pops out of the back as we're disappearing down the side of the ship?
The propellers.
And now I can see this big bronze thing churning.
Shiny and polished.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, if we go in there, it's game over, right? I'd be jumping out, but that was the most frightening thing, that was an oh my God moment.
I bet it was.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to see props for ships that size out of the water.
And the captain of that ship in the inquiry said, he said I was getting closer and closer, and he said, and then I realised, on one of the passes that when the bows went down, the props came out, and he said, so I heaved to and kept away from it. All they did then was just keep us in the, protected from the wind as much as they could.
So let's sort of timeline this now. So you took off at first thing in the morning. So just daylight, basically?
Well, no,
was it still dark when you took off?
It was still dark when we took off.
Okay. So, and then you take off, you arrive. What's your flight time to get there?
It would be almost like 45, 50 minutes.
Okay.
At
So,
least.
and then there's a little bit of flying around, and
Yeah,
then there's a little bit of raising, lowering, and then the next thing you know, you're disconnected. You're in the water with them.
Yeah.
And what kind of timeline do you think you're at here now? With by the time those poor souls inside when they left.
I don't really know, but I would say that we were probably in the rescue mode for at least 2 hours after the event. The helicopter I was in disappeared. I knew that there would be other helicopters coming to pick us up and things like that. And again, it would just be that they have to muster the crews and get the aircraft ready. And probably I think it was in 2 hours, something like that, 2 and a bit. I could see in the horizon 2 little black dots, and I knew what they were because the weather was starting to abate, if you want to call it that, and these things were skimming across the tops. But even they said when they got there they didn't appreciate the size of the waves, and the captain of the Canadian ship that was involved, and in the inquiry he said, and he said there were 90 knot gusts going across my deck, and he said I'd say the wave height was between 45 to 60 feet. So big waves. And I didn't feel particularly afraid of the waves because I'm just going up and down on the waves.
Yeah, it's just riding up and down a hill for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it for the guys in the life raft, it was an absolute nightmare because the life raft wasn't doing what it was supposed to do,
God.
And so then.
So, how did did the helicopters come rescue, or did they launch something from the ferry? Or?
No. I don't think you could have launched anything from, anything. It was that rough.
Except maybe a bit of oil, apparently.
Yeah. And the interesting thing was, though, the helicopters that came were Sea King helicopters, and of course they have a better system.
So at that point, would they have been the newer generation compared to the one you had flown out in?
No, far newer.
And as much as people around, especially Canada, make fun of Sea Kings, let's call a spade a spade. Those things were inactive. Those things were active for 50 years, 55 years.
Yeah,
which, I mean, who's got a car that lasts that long? Nobody.
Yeah, well, exactly. All right. And again, on the Canadian side of things, yes, the guys that look after them or used to look after them, they're looked after. All right. I'd fly in one of them any day, and the ones that picked us up were anti-submarine helicopters. So they have a lot of equipment inside, but they're still capable of coming into the hover and picking us up, and that's what they did.
So they somebody like you, a search and rescue diver, lowers down. Did they take you first, or did they take you last?
No, the helicopter came into the hover over the top of us, and I have the guys that are alive, and they're up first, okay, and they do it from the life raft, okay, so
straight out of the raft.
Straight out of the raft, all right. Then the ones in there that were dead, that were lifted up, and then at the end of the day, it's me, all right, and then I went.
Did you all go in one helicopter?
Yes, yeah, we did, yeah. And the interesting thing, though, during the rescue phase there, the hoisting phase, the lifeboat that was on its way from Penzance, which would be like 30 miles away.
So when you say lifeboat now you're talking like a land-borne rescue small ship type of thing, like a Coast Guard cutter type small, okay.
In the UK we have the Royal National Lifeboat.
Yeah, you guys are funny over there. You call your lifeboats that launch from ships to save you are lifeboats, and your ships that launch from to come rescue you are lifeboats too. And
again, they arrived on the scene, and so that's always good to see them, because the majority of the guys, they're all volunteers, but they're normally, fishermen, old guys that have been fishing for years. They know the sea, and one of those to pitch up is great news for anybody who's in the water. And so that they were just getting on scene, all right, by the time, but we'd already picked up most of the people, and off we go,
So they you get on the helicopter, they fly you back to your base and put you in the hospitals and...
No, nothing as fancy as that. They flew us to a hospital, okay, and then the 2 live ones out and the dead, okay, they get, put out as well. And then what we did is we turned around and went straight back out there, and then...
Because you hadn't had a long enough day yet?
No, they're getting them most for their money,
You're on salary, son. Get back out there.
and so then what happened is they basically what we did is we identified and marked where everybody was, because when we went back onto the search pattern, all right, where the life raft was, all right, the people literally, you could fly along the downwind side, and they were spaced at intervals. And unfortunately, none of those survived. All right.
So what was the ship? Where did all these, I'll say poor people, like, I mean, you got a bunch of sailors that end up in the water. What was the ship? You said something about a cargo vessel that capsized?
Yeah. Okay, so the name of the vessel is not HMS, MV Lovat. Okay? And it is coming out of Cardiff, and it was carrying coal dust, and it was a 1,200 ton cargo vessel, and off they go, and I'm only telling you from the court of inquiry, the coal dust they believe was loaded incorrectly, all right, and it had too much moisture in it, and so when they were trying to make the tide, so what they do is they're loading it quickly. And what they've done is they've made it in a pyramid,
rather than
flatten it all out.
Yeah.
And it's got too much moisture in it. And then as it goes down from Wales, and it has to turn left into the English Channel, all right, and it was going across sea. The cargo moved, shifted to the port side, I think it was. Yeah. And then what happened is they couldn't right it, they couldn't fix it. And then eventually, I believe the engine intakes sucked in water, so that shuts the engines down. So
and now you're just drifting.
So what's going to happen. It's going to drift, beam onto the wind and the sea.
Every time.
The captain, he did the right thing. He got them all on ready to go. But they couldn't launch the lifeboat because...
It was on the low side.
It was on the low side. Okay, and then it got washed off.
And in those days, only the one lifeboat required.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And you just had to have a backup life raft, which
they used.
Yeah.
But apparently, possibly, allegedly, maybe had not maintained according to the way it should be.
One of the good things came out of it, though, is that on the big court of inquiry, it involved the British government, and it was, said that's, we need to have all our sailors trained properly. And what it did was it increased the training, and it improved the maintenance of all the equipment, and so out of that incident, a lot of good came. They changed the rules and regulations. The government changed it. This was, you can read all the documents in, for the Houses of Parliament and things like that. It's all in there.
Yeah, no, well, that's fantastic. And it is, well, the incident isn't fantastic, but as a species, as a civilization, to move onward and forward, we have to try and not repeat the mistakes we made before. So it is satisfactory, I suppose, is the best word, that although people had to die, at least the regulations were changed so that those particular set of circumstances shouldn't happen again. Because I mean, we can look right now, and the way lifeboats and arrangements are right now exceed that. They're better than they were back then. And the standards for life rafts, I mean, off the top of my head, I know that here in Canada, the life rafts have to be replaced entirely every 3 years, and they have to be inspected every year by a third party. So you have to bring in, your experts from wherever to look at the rafts, and hopefully not end up with a dud raft. Wow, that's amazing.
And you know yourself, having attended the inquest, all right, all the evidence is there. So the life raft was there and everything, and the judge, all right, I don't think he's called a judge, but he's there.
The person at the front of the room,
yeah,
anyway.
He looks at everything as well, and there was a container, and he actually said, "What is this container?" And it's a round cylindrical tube, all right. And he said, "Well, what are all these saw cuts on it?" And it's me while I'm in the life raft. I'm trying to hold on to the people. I've got my diving knife out, and I'm trying to saw the end off because you can't undo it. It was covered in...
Oh, are you talking the
survival aids?
Like with the equipment that comes in a life raft?
Yeah.
You couldn't get it into it?
So they couldn't get it open, all right? And I saw it in the bottom of the raft. I thought, I'll open that, I'll get the flares out and stuff like that. When I try, it's got like a wax coating all over it. Okay, and the ends were, what...
So is it supposed to sort of screw off at one end?
Well, yeah, but you couldn't. It was thorough. It was wax, and also what they'd done at the end that you could open. All right, you guys call it duct tape. I call it masking tape. All right, there's like four rolls of that around it, so it's really tightly packed.
Yeah, so everything in there is completely watertight, which is wonderful, except that you can't get at the damn thing.
And you know that. 2 minutes of you being in cold water, you can't use your fingers properly, all right? And they said, what are all these saw marks? And it's me with my diving knife trying to saw the end off.
Trying to get at it.
But I had to stop doing it because there were danger of me stabbing somebody. And so I thought, well, I'll just hold on to them and look after them,
Yeah.
And that's how it all transpired.
Wow. So for the folks at home, the way life raft equipment is typically packed now, it's not in plastic hard shells. And the life rafts they're in fiberglass shells usually. But the life raft kits that are inside, which would include your food supplies, water supplies, flares, signaling devices, that sort of thing, they're usually in a sort of a dry bag type arrangement, which if you needed to, I suppose you could get open with a knife, but hopefully you could just, rip open one end and away you go. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so that changed the Department of Transport's approach to search and rescue, and the British government said it's an absolute tragedy to lose that amount of people at sea, and especially
with other vessels there.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like in what at least in concept should have been a survivable event.
Yeah.
Wow.
But again, the waves that size, you're at the mercy of Mother Nature now.
If you could do it all again, what would you do differently on that day?
I might have had a little bit bigger breakfast, to be honest, because normally
you're getting a bit peckish by the end of all that, were you?
You go to work and you have some form of food. All right, but I'd had I think, I don't even know what type of cereal at home, and of course, when I had a 14-mile drive, so I'd take, maybe a marmalade sandwich or something like that with me and eat that on the way.
You're a heathen. You're a heathen, Gibbo. Who eats marmalade sandwiches?
Well, the Brits do. and so that was the... that's what I had, but I often, I talk to my wife now and I laugh about this. When we arrived back at the station, the airbase, all right, the Sea King helicopters were parked normally about a good mile away from where my search and rescue squadron was. Okay, so the interesting thing there was they landed and they taxied to where they are going to shut down, and I said, well, can you drop me off? And they said, no, we got to go in here. And so I get out and I've just been through all this and I've got my fins and my diving gear.
And now you got to go for
And now I start walking across an airfield that's closed, all right, and I'm walking along. I've no clue. I'm just going to go back to work because I'm programmed like that, go back to work, all right? And I'm walking along and I'm thinking, I'll get back and I'll have a cup of tea and then I see a little Royal Navy Mini And I'd never seen one of these before, and it's driving towards me, and I'm walking directly across the main runway, and it screams up to me, and this voice goes, "Are you the diver that just got out of that, search and rescue?" "Yeah, yes, sir, I am." All right, of course it's a sir, okay, and it's a lieutenant commander, and he's the public relations officer.
Oh.
All right, so I said, are you going back to the search and rescue outfit, and can you drop me off, sir? He goes, "No, you're coming with me," and so I then go. You're
still in your wetsuit?
Yeah, I'm just, and then there's all these, photographers and, what's going on and all this, and I'm saying, well, look, I can't really stop and talk. I got to go back. I'm the duty diver. And the lieutenant commander, "Don't worry about that, Gibbs. I've got that all under control, like this." And that's how it was. And after they interviewed me and
so did they go right to interviews and everything? They didn't give you sort of a brief on what to say, what not to say?
I was just like, we have none of that. Nowadays you would be taken aside. Do you want a therapist or not?
Goodness me, you'd have a legal team, telling you what you could talk about, what you can't talk about.
And it was all done, and and eventually I just got in the Mini, and we drove back, and he dropped me off, and I walk into the crew room, and there's everybody sat there, they're all they've all come to work.
They've already had a nap and a dinner and everything while they're waiting for you.
And I can tell you, the next day I go flying in a helicopter as if nothing's happened, And the beauty of it is, though, and I mean, if you have proud moments in your life, I don't know, about a month later, I get almost like a message from the Queen.
From the Queen.
Right. And
from Her Majesty.
Her Majesty. It's not from the Queen, but she's the one who said yes. All right. And she awarded me the Queen's Gallantry Medal. All right. So I then have to go and meet the Queen, which is great.
Then you have to go meet the Queen. I know. It was hard to take time out of your day for that, I'm sure.
She won't come to me. and so I get a trip to the palace, where I'm, probably one of the lowest ranks there. All right, but the amazing thing, all the if you want to call the guys that look after the big crowds who are getting medals and stuff like that, they're all commodores, commanders. There'll be a couple of rear admirals there.
A lot of stripes and stuff.
And of course I'm the man. I'm the one getting the medal, and so it was great. They come up to me, "Leading Air Crewman Gibbs, well done. It's great for the Navy." This sort of thing. Yeah, I know, sir.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
I'll take you to your seat now, and they put you there and say, "This is what you're going to say to the Queen when she speaks to you."
Now the legal team comes in and gives you the direction.
They just be polite and use your common sense.
So don't flirt.
Not that I would.
Eye contact only.
Yeah. But and so that was what came out of that for me.
Well, you know what? That's pretty amazing. It's not everybody that meets the Queen, and it's not everybody that meets the Queen having done something that I think we can go ahead and call it heroic.
Well, yeah. Thank you very much, and
thank you very much.
And again, like I say, I've had a really unusual life. Because there's been many incidents, like this.
We'll divulge into that. I think that Peter Gibbs is going to make more than one appearance on our show here.
Well, that would be nice.
We'd love to have you.
Okay.
So that's probably a good spot to wrap this one up. We'll thank Peter Gibbs very much for that incredibly entertaining, harrowing, and amazing story of survival and I'll say fortitude, because that took some staying power to hang in there, and that sounds like some extremely difficult circumstances, and then just grind your way back to work when you get back.
Yeah, well, that's how it is.
That's the job. So thanks very much, Peter, and we'll look forward to having you again on the show, and thanks very much. That's a wrap.
Thank you, Dan. That was great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
If you've got an interesting story or think you know someone who'd make a great guest on the show, please reach out to us at legacysurvivalstories, all one word, @gmail.com. You can also find us at legacysurvivalstories.buzzsprout.com. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and help us move up the charts with a 5-star rating. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Stitcher, and almost anywhere you can find podcasts.
Standing light. You're going down, Go down!
Legacy Survival Stories.